Hello there and welcome to this video. My name is Ashutosh. I'm a developer evangelist at R3, and in this video I'm going to talk about the new Corda Node Explorer. I'm really excited to bring this to you. The new Explorer has a whole lot of new features which the older one didn't have. So before actually going into the newer one, let me try and explain the limitations that the older one had. Right. So the older one was only capable of running the uh, with a Finance Code app. So if your node has the Finance Code app installed, the Node Explorer would work and you could do transactions on that. But if you have a custom Code app and your Finance Code app is not installed on your node, the Node Explorer wouldn't even work. So it wouldn't even spin up, right? So that was a limitation, quite a big limitation basically. But we've tried to overcome that with the new Node Explorer, which is what you see right in your screen. That's how it would look like when you start when you just start it up, and you can log in using the node credentials. We'll talk about that, but just in case you're wondering how you could get a copy of it, we have done a beta release already. So you could go to github.com/corda/node explorer/releases, and down there you would find all these different installers for different operating systems. So you have an app image, a DMG, a exe, and a dev for all three Linux, Windows, and Mac OSs, right? I'm going to paste a link of this in the description of the video, so don't worry about that. So let's come down back to our Node Explorer, right? So in order to log in, the first thing that you have to do is give the host. So if you are hosting your node or your node is running on your local machine, just type in localhost and then the port. So let me show you what you have to do. So if you go to when your node is running, you have this RPC connection through which you connect to your node, right? So you have to give the RPC port. So this is my host, this is my port. I'm trying to connect to party A. Before that, let me just give you an idea of what we are going to do in this demo. So I'll be using the Obligation Code app to demonstrate the Node Explorer. The Obligation Code app is where you issue obligations and settle them. Eventually we'll talk more about it when I do the demo, but yeah. So it has three parties: party A, party B, party C, and there is of course a notary as well. So with that, let me just try to log in to this particular node. So that was the node's port. The user is, as always, user1 and test, the default one which we use in all our samples, right? Before we try to connect, let me just show you what this use SSH does, right? So it's not just that you could connect to a node that's running on your local machine. You also use SSH, and you could connect to a node running on a remote machine. So you could just type in your SSH port, your SSH username and password, and it will connect to that node running on a remote machine. But for the purpose of the demo, localhost works. Let's just connect to this particular node, right? And it says please wait, and boom, there you go. Before we try to look into all these different tabs, first thing that you have to do is just go to the settings and try to explain this to you. Like I said, we are now trying to support each and every custom code app, so which means we need to know what code apps are installed on your node, right? We can't just be supporting that unless we know what code app is installed. We could obviously fetch the data like the vault and stuff, because the class synthesis is not required to fetch the vault. Not going into the details there, but in order to run a particular flow, we need to know what flows are installed and how to get a class instance of that particular flow, right? So that's where you have to give us a path to your code apps, which is this particular path. For me, that's where my application code app is. I'm just going into one of the nodes code app folder, right? But you could choose to put all your code apps in a particular folder and then point your Node Explorer to that particular folder. So that's what's important. Just type in the path to your code app that your node is hosting on this particular settings tab, and then there are a few other settings which is around the type of format of date that you want to display. So if there is any date in any of the data in your that the Node Explorer will fetch from the nodes. So if you have put a date format, that's how your date would basically look like. Right, so that's overall from this perspective. You could also see I am connected to party A, which is shown here by this small little box over here. You could click on that, it shows your location, and that's basically the X500 name, right? And then there's a logout button, which is just log out as it says. So let's talk about the dashboard. Dashboard has two widgets as of now, but we'll be adding more as we do more releases of this particular new version of the Corda Node Explorer. Let's talk about these two wizards, but as of now, right? So the first wizard that I'll be talking about is the node information wizard. So what we're doing here is fetching all the node diagnostics information, and what that gives you is the flavor of the node, which is it a open source or is it an enterprise? So for me, it's open source. The version of Corda running on that, it's 4.4, the platform version. Also gives you certain information about what are the Corda apps that are installed. So for me, there are 4 different Corda apps. I talked about the obligation one, which is this particular one. Let me remind you that this is sort of this is not actually segregated into 2 different Corda apps, which it should generally be, but for the purpose of the demo, it works, right? But it has both the workflows and your contracts all bundled into a single fat jar. And there are all these different supporting Corda apps which the obligation Corda app uses, the finance Corda app as well as the confidential identity Corda app. So you don't really need the finance and confidential identity if that's not the dependency in your Corda app. But yeah, for me to run the obligation, these are the dependencies. So I have all these four Corda apps installed on the node. Now that gives you a basic idea of what this wizard does. It also gives you information about each of these particular Corda apps, what is the version of that Corda app, and then what's the minimum platform version, all this sort of information, the vendor, and these are the things which are picked up while your Corda app is deployed on the node. This information is generally provided by the developer using from the build.gradle file, right? Well, so next thing is your node parameters. This is more about the node, and then we come to the entire network, right? So when you deploy a network, you have something called the network parameters, which gives you certain global parameters, or some parameters which are global to the entire network, like what is the minimum platform version that the network as a whole supports, right? And then the version of it, which means as you change it, the version increases, right? And then last time it was modified, the max transaction size, all this sort of information. If you have any, so basically you're having some notaries. So who are the notaries or the designated notaries of your particular network? And then if you are using whitelist constraints, so that means you'll also have some whitelisted contracts, which can be viewed over here. I'm not using that because this Corda app uses the signature constraint, so no whitelist constraints available. Well, that's pretty much about the dashboard. We'll add more widgets as we go forward, but for now we have 2 of them. Going to network, this is pretty much what we had in the earlier version of the Node Explorer. Nothing much changes here. You get a view of where your nodes are, not the exact location, but what your location in your Corda X500 name says. So you get your own identity. You get to know who you are, which you already know, I suppose, but still just a visualization there. So basically, it says what's your public key, what's your location, and what's the address what's your P2P address where you could be communicated, and then what are the notaries available in this particular network, and then your peers. So that's yourself and the notary minus everybody else, right? So that's the entire. Sorry, what that should be the entire network, minus yourself and the notary. So those are the peers. Right, not much of information, just plotting on this GA and just a visual representation of the network, right? And then going to transactions. Well, this is where things start to get a little interesting, right? You could see all the transactions that your node is aware of. So right now I haven't done any transaction, but as and when I do it, I'll see those transactions over here. So let's do a transaction, right? It says, do I not have the correct? Yeah, that's not the correct. That's not actually the correct path to my Corda app. So let me just type in that thing. I'll just copy this. This is where my Corda apps are. Okay. Just before I do that, just in case you haven't done that, you'll get this little information over here. And you try to run a new flow, right? So it would say that no flows found. That might be one of the reason is because you don't have any. We do not know where your Corda apps lie, right? So you have to basically, it will tell you to go to the settings tab and give us that information. So for me, the codeps are here. I thought I had the right location, but that's not the case. Anyways, I can update that here. Did it work? Did it? Yeah. So my location is updated, and now once I come here, I just reload this. Well, yeah. So once you reload, you can now see that we have all these flows which have come, which have been populated, right? So we have read the jars, and then on the dynamically these flows are now populated. So let me do issue obligation. So what that means is I'm issuing an obligation, and which means I'm sort of borrowing some money from someone. So let's say I'm borrowing 100 USD, and then from whom is it that I'm borrowing? Let's say party C, and whether I do want to use confidential identity, which means whether I want to do this transaction using confidential identity. But let me say for the purpose of demo, I'm not doing that. It becomes easier to visualize who the parties are, right? So if it's true, which means I use an anonymous identities, then you won't be able to see who the parties are. It will give you a pseudo-anonymous key, which means you are using confidential identity. That means your identity is not getting displayed to everyone out there who is seeing that particular transaction, right? So what else do we have here is we have a list of constructors. Now if your flow has multiple constructors, there's multiple ways that you could actually trigger this flow, then you could do that. You would have a list of constructors over there, and you could select the one that you prefer to use, and then type in the values. So you also get a little bit of a help here, like if the type of parameter that it's expecting. For this one, it's an amount, and how would you really what's the format of amount that is expected? It's 100 USD. So you have a integer number, and then after that the currency basically. So that's what it is. Since everything that you type in here is a text, and then we need to convert it into its corresponding type to be able to trigger the flow. We give you a little bit of a hint there around what kind of values that we are expecting from you. And it's a type of party, will you don't have to worry about that. We'll just populate the list from the network map, right? So once you have all this data in here, you could just say execute, and you should be running down there in the background. Hold on, what happened? Oh yeah, the first one takes a little bit of time because the node was probably running for a longer period of time. But yeah, that works. Next time I think it should be faster, because that was the first transaction that I did on a newly spin up network, right? So it was a little bit on the slow side, but that's all right. So you get this information saying flow successful, and then whatever you are basically returning from your flow. For this example, it's a signed transaction. So I get the signed transactions transaction ID. Well, after I do this flow, what you see here is this transaction. So the node is now aware of a particular transaction. So you could just expand this. Before expanding, you get a view of a high-level view of what the transaction looks like. You have a transaction ID, you have inputs and outputs, and your command. So it was an issue command which I triggered. It was there was one output, which is the obligation, and then there was no input. So you can click on it to expand it to see, view more details about it, where you get to see there was no input, there was an output basically, and then what are the different fields available in your output state, right? So the amount was 1000, which the obligations amount was 1000, and then the lender is party C, the borrower is party A, nothing has been paid off, and then it has a linear ID because that probably is a linear state. Right, that's it. And then what we could really do is I'll just try to explain this next one. Here is the vault section. Now you have a vault tab which gives you a view of your entire vault. It just brings the entire vault and puts it over here on this page, right? And down here you write on the right side what you have, or the left side basically, what you have is your different filters that you want to use. But let me just come back to this later on while we do a little more transactions, so that we get to know how to use the filters. But generally, just tick on one of these to see what are there. So if I go on consumed, there's nothing. So there's just one one state that has been issued. It's unconsumed, so basically you just have one. Again, the contract state, it basically populates dynamically. If you see, there's just one contract state over there, which is obligation. That's the only one available in the node, in the node's vault to be specific. But as and when more states get issued and your vault stores more data, this gets populated dynamically, saying what are the different contract state types that you really have, and then you get a list of them over here. You can also filter on the basis of parties. If you say if you click one of the parties, only those states appear where your clicked party or your selected party is basically a party to that particular state, right? So having said that, we'll come back to that later on while we do more transactions. I've done an issuance, but I can't do a modification because this is the guy. The modification of this obligation has to be done by the one who is basically the borrower or lender, the lender. So basically I'll have to go to party C. So let me just log out of party A and log into party C as a local host. Just check what the port is for party C. It is 10,012. Then you go to user 1 and then test again and connect. Go back to your transaction. He's also aware of this transaction because he was a party to the transaction. And then I could say I want to do a transfer obligation, right? So there's just one constructor. Oh, shit, I need the linear ID. Copy that to a transfer obligation, not a settle. Yeah. Oh, where is it? Here you go. So yeah, the transfer obligation, just paste in the linear ID. Who is the new lender? Let's say party B. And then we don't want to do it as anonymous, so let's say false again. Execute the transaction, and it's going to take a lot of time. I don't know why it's taking so much of time. Yeah, probably my system is going slow. Anyways, so let's see what we have here. Right, so we had this issue obligation. So if you see it properly, you could get a view of even the UTXO model. So you see that this says this is the transaction ID. It's basically the state ref, right? So you have a transaction ID and your output index, right? So this particular transaction, and if you compare this and this, these are the same values, which means this output from this transaction is used in the input here in this transaction, and then it's producing another output, right? And here you see what's the command type is, and also who the different signers of this particular transaction are. What I say is I have now this obligation which is taken as an input, which was exactly this one here, and then I'm producing an output where I'm changing the lender to party B, which used to be party C here. So get a view of what a transaction is doing, right? So that's it. Now you could also view your vault. It has a consumed one obligation. There's nothing unconsumed. Why is that? Because this guy is not anymore a party of to the transaction. So the unconsumed one is should be available with party A and party B, right? Let me go to party B then. Local host 1009, and then user 1 test, right? Log in, go to transactions. Let me see the vault. Yeah, he has the unconsumed transaction. He has the unconsumed one, right? So here you go. Basically the same transactions, but what this guy could actually, so it's with party B now. Let me go to party A and try to settle this transaction so that we see what happens. Because host 1006 user 1 and test. There you go. He has both this unconsumed and the consumed one, right? Because he was a party to the transaction throughout the state evolution, right? So you could also see only the consumed one now and only the unconsumed one now. So that's how the filters work. Won't be going into much details there, but you can now settle the obligation. So let me try to settle this. I can't really settle because I need to pay. So let me first issue some cash to this guy. So I can issue some cash to myself. I need 1,000, so let me just go ahead and issue 1500 USD. And who's the issuer? Let it be myself. Let me self issue, doesn't matter for the sake of the demo. And who the notary is, that's the notary. Now if you see, you have different constructors here, which but I'll just go with the first one. Doesn't matter, I can execute this to basically issue some cash to myself, right? There you go, the cash has been issued to me. I have a 1500 rupees or USD worth of cash. So as I said, this is dynamic, right? So you have a cash state which has been the contract state filter here, this dynamic. So you have a cash state which has been issued onto your ledger. So now you get a cash state in your filters as well. So you can filter basis on that now. So one cash state. Right, back to transactions. Now we have some cash issued to ourselves, so we can try to settle the obligation. I again need the linear ID, which is this one. Go down here, settle obligation, the linear ID, and the amount. Let me not settle all of it, but I'll say settle 800 USD. Yeah, not anonymous. And execute. So what this would do is it would do sort of a DBP transaction. It would do the settlement of the obligation as well as the transfer of cash together. So that's how the DBP transaction works. You have two legs of a transaction and then both of them happening together in an atomic way, right? What do you see? There's a whole lot of things happening here. So what's going on? We have an obligation as an input. We have a cash as an input, right? And then what's happening is the obligation which is here, is basically getting settled. So 800 has been paid, and then you have cash. So basically 800 cash is transferred from party A to party B. So if you see, the owner here is party A and the owner here becomes party B, but then I had 1500, so the 700 has to be given back to me, so which is not me, basically party A. But yeah, that's what is happening. But the cash Corda by default uses confidential identity whenever you have a change which is to be transferred, so that when someone looks at this transaction, doesn't trace back to where the cash went, right? So that's how the cash Corda works. Let's not go into details of that, but for the purpose of the explanation that I'm doing, let's say so the 700 which is left out of the 1500 after paying 800, that's being transferred back to the one who is paying, so which is party A, using confidential identity, so you don't see who the owner is, right? That's how it works. Well, now you go to your vault, you see a whole lot of state. You can now basically say, I just want to see my cash state, or I want to see only unconsumed. So there you go, you can do that. So all this you can play around with different filters that are there. So yeah, I guess that's it for this demo. You would have got a pretty good idea of what the Node Explorer does, right? So feel free to download it and play around with it. Let us know if you face any issues. Put issues on the GitHub link over on the GitHub directly over there, and we'll try to pick up and fix them in the next release.